One of the most curious and fascinating ancient artifacts that has ever been found is the Phaistos disc, recovered from the ruins of a Minoan palace.
In the ruins of an ancient palace on Crete, a small clay disc emerged from the earth, carrying symbols arranged with unsettling precision. At first it seemed decorative, almost playful, until researchers noticed something else hiding inside its spiral. Boundaries that suggested intention, structure, and a message waiting patiently across 4,000 years. The discovery that shouldn't exist. In the summer of 1908, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier was excavating the ruins of the Minoan palace at Phaistos, a sprawling complex on the southern coast of Crete that had already revealed layers of Bronze Age life. Workers were clearing a small underground chamber when a flat object, hardened by fire and time, appeared beneath the soil. At first glance, it resembled a simple clay tablet, yet its perfectly circular form immediately set it apart from the rectangular records typically associated with ancient writing. Pernier lifted it carefully, noticing rows of tiny figures pressed into its surface, spiraling inward with a precision that felt deliberate rather than decorative. The discovery created immediate uncertainty among scholars, because nothing quite like it had ever been found in the Aegean world. The disc seemed both familiar and alien, belonging to a civilization known for artistry, yet presenting a method of inscription that looked unexpectedly systematic. Even before the symbols were studied, the artifact challenged assumptions about how information was recorded during the Bronze Age. Archaeologists began asking whether it was a ritual object, a teaching tool, or something more ambitious that history had simply forgotten. As researchers moved from excitement to analysis, attention shifted from the discovery itself to the object's unusual construction, because the way the symbols were made would raise even deeper questions about purpose and intent. A message pressed into clay. The disc measures roughly 16 centimeters across, small enough to fit in 2 hands, yet dense with visual information that feels carefully organized rather than improvised. Its surface is covered by a spiral path that begins at the outer edge and winds inward, filled with stamped signs depicting human figures, animals, tools, and abstract shapes. Unlike most ancient inscriptions, which were carved or scratched by hand, these symbols were impressed using individual stamps pressed into soft clay before the disc was fired. That single detail has fascinated researchers for decades because it suggests planning, repetition, and perhaps even a standardized system for producing text. As scholars cataloged the symbols, they realized that many repeat in recognizable patterns, implying intentional arrangement instead of random decoration. The spiral itself guides the eye in a controlled direction, almost as if the maker expected a reader to follow a sequence. The most striking insight, however, came from closer examination of faint divider lines that separate the spiral into discrete fields, each containing a small cluster of signs. These boundaries create units that resemble words or phrases, reinforcing the idea that the disc contains structured communication rather than symbolic art. If this interpretation is correct, the implications are profound, because the artifact would represent one of the earliest known examples of text, organized into deliberate segments. Yet the meaning remains elusive, leaving researchers suspended between certainty about structure and uncertainty about purpose. That tension naturally pushed the next generation of scholars toward a more ambitious question, which was whether the message could ever be read at all. The code no one can read. From the moment the symbols were documented, linguists and archaeologists began trying to decode them, hoping the disc might unlock a forgotten language of the Bronze Age. The challenge was immediate and severe because the inscription stands alone, with no companion texts to provide comparison or context. Ancient scripts are usually deciphered through repetition across multiple artifacts, yet the Phaistos disc remains a singular object, leaving researchers without the statistical patterns that normally guide translation. Scholars counted the signs, mapped their frequencies, and compared them with known systems from the region, but every promising lead eventually stalled. Some researchers attempted to link the symbols to Linear A, the still undeciphered writing used by the Minoans, while others compared it to Linear B, the script later used for early Greek administrative records. The visual similarities, however, proved superficial because the structure and sign forms did not align consistently with either system. Theories multiplied as a result. Some proposed the disc was a religious hymn, others imagined a ritual calendar, a board game, or even a magical incantation intended for ceremonial use. A few skeptics went further, suggesting it might be a modern forgery created to impress early archaeologists, though most experts reject this idea due to the excavation context and material analysis. The human story behind the research is equally compelling because generations of scholars have invested years trying to hear a voice that refuses to speak. Each new hypothesis briefly reignites hope before evidence pulls the field back into uncertainty. The inability to read the disc has transformed it from a simple artifact into a symbol of archaeological humility, reminding researchers how much of the ancient world remains silent. To understand why this silence matters, it helps to step back and examine the civilization that produced it, because the disc's true mystery grows clearer against the backdrop of the Bronze Age Mediterranean. The Bronze Age world around the disc. When the Phaistos disc was created, the Minoan civilization dominated the Aegean Sea, building palaces filled with vibrant frescoes, complex storage systems, and evidence of extensive trade reaching Egypt and the Near East. Archaeological records show a society comfortable with administration, commerce, and symbolic expression, supported by early writing systems used mainly for accounting and record-keeping. Clay tablets discovered across Crete reveal lists of goods, inventories, and bureaucratic details, suggesting a culture where writing served practical needs rather than storytelling or public communication. Against this background, the disc feels strangely out of place because its spiral design and stamped imagery appear more deliberate and artistic than the routine records found elsewhere. Researchers have long debated whether the disc represents a local experiment or an imported idea influenced by distant cultures. Some scholars argue that the stamped symbols suggest a controlled production method, potentially hinting at an early attempt to standardize text beyond individual handwriting. Others caution that a single artifact cannot rewrite history, emphasizing that without additional examples, it may represent an isolated curiosity rather than a widespread practice. This tension between possibility and restraint defines much of the debate surrounding the object, because the Minoan world offers both context and contradiction. The more historians study the era, the more the disc seems to sit at the edge of known systems, almost as if someone briefly tried something new and left no continuation behind. That possibility leads naturally to a deeper question about structure itself, because hidden within the spiral is a feature that reframes the artifact from artistic oddity into something far more intentional. Structure hidden in plain sight. For decades, many researchers treated the disc as an enigmatic collection of symbols, fascinating but ultimately indecipherable, until closer analysis of its layout shifted the conversation in a subtle but profound way. The faint divider lines separating the spiral into 61 distinct fields revealed that the creator was not merely arranging images for visual balance, but organizing them into bounded units that resemble linguistic segments. Each field contains a small cluster of signs, often repeating in patterns that suggest rules governing order and placement. This realization transformed the discussion because it implied that the disc was designed to be parsed, almost as if the maker expected someone to recognize where one idea ended and another began. The structured segmentation also changed how scholars interpreted the stamping technique itself. Rather than random reuse of symbols, the repeated signs may represent intentional building blocks assembled according to a system, raising the possibility that the disc reflects an early experiment in controlled text production. Some experts cautiously describe it as a precursor to printing, while others argue that such comparisons risk projecting modern concepts onto ancient practices. What remains undeniable, however, is the deliberate choreography between symbols and boundaries, suggesting that meaning was embedded not only in individual signs, but in their arrangement across the spiral. This insight does not solve the mystery, yet it reshapes the emotional stakes of the artifact, because the disc begins to feel less like a puzzle without rules, and more like a message whose grammar survives, even if its language does not. As modern technology enters the investigation, researchers now ask whether new tools might finally illuminate what human intuition alone could not decipher. Modern science meets ancient silence. In recent years, researchers have turned to technologies that early archaeologists could never have imagined, hoping digital tools might reveal patterns invisible to the human eye. High-resolution photography, 3D scanning, and microscopic analysis have allowed scientists to examine the depth and pressure of each stamped sign, confirming that the symbols were pressed deliberately and with consistent force. Computational linguists have also applied statistical modeling, testing whether the sequence of signs behaves like known writing systems, and some results suggest structured repetition similar to language rather than random symbolism. These findings strengthen the argument that the disk contains intentional communication, yet they stop short of revealing meaning. The paradox facing modern researchers is that better data has not produced clearer answers. Algorithms can identify recurring patterns, but without a bilingual reference or parallel text, even the most advanced models cannot assign reliable meaning to the symbols. Some teams compare the disk to encrypted data without a key, where structure is visible but interpretation remains locked away. This tension between technological progress and persistent silence has reshaped the narrative around the artifact, turning it into a case study in the limits of scientific certainty. As each new method adds detail without translation, the mystery becomes less about whether the disk was meaningful and more about why its message has survived alone. That lingering question carries the story beyond laboratories and academic debates, because the real significance of the disk lies in what it reveals about humanity's relationship with the past. 4,000 years ago, someone pressed meaning into clay, believing the future would listen, and today we are still trying to answer that silent invitation. If this story sparked your curiosity, subscribe, share your thoughts below, and join us as we uncover the mysteries history still refuses to explain.